So we're pretty much at the hour here. I want to thank our nursing home peer mentors for joining us, excuse me, with these sessions, and also with our associates here with our faculty mentors. So we have Vanessa, Jean, Michelle. So today, we're moving on. Whoa, I was going to comment about that pathway there. Thank you. It's a lovely picture there with the dunes. But the pathway towards QAPI, so we're looking at QAPI at a glance, reviewing the different elements. So today we wanted to do steps 3 and 4 as part of our QAPI improvement program. Next slide, please. So today's agenda is that we want to look at a new study, some new information about COVID-19 and survivorship in the long-term care setting. We want to then review last week's action plans, I call them. We call them homework also, so however we view that. And then we want to look at the actual QAPI developmental elements, looking at the guiding principles of QAPI. And then we want to zoom in on this month's PIP, which we're focusing on by consent decree here on looking at resident social isolation. So as you all recall, we looked at different PIP options, and I think we had like over 60% of our participants wanted to zoom in on the resident social isolation issue. Okay, so if you don't mind, the next slide. So this just recently came out of the Journal for the American Geriatric Society, and there's a couple things that, I don't particularly like the information showing that survival is not too good amongst frail older adults. But you can see the curves here of survival, and the green represents a less frail person, and the brownish orange at the bottom of this graph shows a highly frail older individual. And what particularly caught my attention here is the column to the left, where you have these frailty scales going from on a 1 to 10 scale. And what I like about it is that it has these not stick figures, but shadow figures that represent the different levels of frailty, going from somebody that's upright and very robust to somebody that's vulnerable by using a cane, who may also have slower gait speed, for example. And then the mildly frail individual who's progressed to a rolling walker may be walking even more slowly, may have troubles with transfers. And then moving on to the moderately frail to the severely frail, borderline terminally ill. So I think these pictures actually are very representative of these, at least 4 different levels of frailty. And you can see that with the graph on the right, that after they get admitted to a facility, that the probability of survival for those individuals over a 6-month period declines considerably. So there's a huge 30-day post-admission death rate, which I found interesting, and it reminds me of a case that I had where a gentleman was admitted to a nursing home, and apparently nobody had a frank discussion with him about his cancer, and so I had a discussion with him about his cancer and his prognosis, and unfortunately the guy just, after learning this news, stopped eating and died within 1 week. So I think the point of that story is that a lot of times in transition to a facility, that transition in itself can be a very impactful health event, particularly in the most vulnerable and severely frail older adults. So again, the transfer to a new setting can of itself have an impact that's not necessarily reflective of the care from the long-term care facility, but rather the life circumstances that occur with that individual. So the fact that they were transferred to a long-term care facility in itself represents a pretty significant change in their life, and often results in a end of life situation for them. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what I'd like to do here is in the chat box, and if I can pull up my chat box here, what I'd like to do is just kind of go over these questions one by one. So I think our nursing home mentors, our peer mentors, may have been involved in some of this. So if in the chat box, you can just put down firstly yes or no as to whether you did any data assessment or evaluation for resident isolation. So as you recall, we were offering the UCLA isolation survey or a modified version of that, or just simply asking people, whatever tool that you use. So just want to get some feedback here as to whether you gathered any data from that to identify residents who are socially isolated or lonely. Yeah, great, Allison. That's you did 12 residents on Rosewood. One of the questions that we have here is, what you found. Very interesting. Andrea reports, excuse me, 75% of the residents surveyed were socially isolated. So I think one of the other facilities that we were talking about had about 50-50. So it seems like it's a pretty high number. Leanne's talking about the surprised by the results. Yeah, that they would report more loneliness than you did. So again, there's great variation in that. Yeah, Colleen talks about 12 residents. They weren't as lonely as we thought. Yeah, so there's a couple of facilities that indicated that the residents were actually content, with what was being offered. And so really two questions come up. Of those that have a certain percent, I mean, anything to me over 10% loneliness is a call to action, for doing an intervention. Yeah, I'm looking also, we had 2 of the 12 residents respond with a 3 and a 1, and with a 4 to the question, do you feel isolated from others? Very good. Yeah, so the question then becomes, whether there's a effort to target some intervention for those that feel lonely versus those that don't. I mean, they may benefit from a social isolation intervention also, so that doesn't preclude that. But I think what we're recognizing here is that the data has revealed a range of results that's facility specific, right? So that's why we do these as part of our root cause analysis. Either Michelle or Jean or Vanessa, do you have any comments about these, the feedback we're getting here?
I'll just say I am thrilled to see so many took this on. And since I missed last week, I've still been kind of questioning where we decide to do interventions, what number, and maybe you gave more guidance on that last week. I just am interested in, if there was a standard number that people used, or were they going more individualized when they decided that they needed those interventions?
Yeah, so if you can, again, put in the chat box, did your survey lead you to think that a new intervention was necessary?
I also I like the comments that, that it was a surprise for many of them. And that's kind of a big point of QAPI, is the fact that there, behind every single thing that you do, there's data behind it that shows this is what the problem is, and it is a problem or it isn't even a problem. We don't need to do an intervention for it. And then when we do the intervention, our numbers help us really define whether we were successful or not. It's not just a subjective, everything's better now. We actually see a result of what we did. So thank you everybody for participating.
Yeah, I think also, I'm sorry, Dr. Jurevich. I think also what is important, I see that, Missouri Sloat mentioned compassionate care visits helping. And I think that was very instrumental that, in November, they opened up, CMS actually opened up more compassionate care visitation and opened up that definition so that they could be used. And, now with, visitation reopening, and if you have to close down for an outbreak, to definitely continue to consider those compassionate care visits, because those are very important.
Yeah, so Allison's commenting about some of the residents reported feeling alone, that they preferred to be alone, or if they did, they feel it has gotten better with more visitations now. So yeah, I mean, good point, Allison. I think really the idea of getting your finger on the pulse from time to time, so doing the survey like this, maybe twice a year, maybe quarterly would be an option to see if there are any trends, towards this movement. So the idea is that for the month of April, let's say you had 25% of your patients expressed loneliness, you do the intervention, and it could be a couple of interventions. It could be, compassionate visits, or it could be another type of intervention. We talked about using art and crafts as an intervention, some correspondences with the community. So the idea is that if at 25% in April, then you come back and measure it in June, then you see if that number goes down to 12%. So then you show an improvement. If it stays at 25% or goes up to 35%, then whatever you're doing is probably not having as strong of an impact as you had expected. Now, the only twist to that story is that you might have new residents that you surveyed. So you have to actually use the same residents that you surveyed before, because you may get a whole new batch of residents that you hadn't surveyed or were new residents, and would give you a different percentage of loneliness. All right, well, very good. Just as a reminder, I know Sarah's got this as one of the points in the slide. If you did do that survey, and if you've not put it into the Dropbox request, please do so, because we want to, again, use that for helping reimburse your efforts, for gathering this kind of data for your facility. So just as a reminder. Okay, next slide, please. Oh yeah, so we talked about, and Michelle, can comment on this. So we just wanted to find out what database you're using for your benchmarking for either national or state data. So we cited Casper or Care Compare. So if you just put in the chat box what you're using. Like we heard from our nursing home mentors that Casper is the main one.
Yeah, I'm sorry again that I wasn't on last Wednesday, but I did have a slide in there that kind of pulled out how you can use that for benchmarking against the state and the nation, to see where everybody else is at. And we can certainly talk more about this as we go on with our sessions and talk about different data sources.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So Michelle, in using the Casper data, can that be transferred into your spreadsheet that you use for the data metrics?
Certainly. You can put anything you want in there.
Good, good, good. Yeah, so that's something that maybe, I don't know, just I'm such a visual oriented person. Maybe we can next week, have a slide that shows that, the benchmark data versus the facility specific data. That'd be great.
I'll see
Okay,
what I
well,
can do.
I'm sorry.
I'll see what I can do.
Yeah,
I am not adept enough to do it, but I know people. So
Yeah.
I will certainly see what I can do.
Perfect. All right. Well, that's there you go. We got some homework to do. Action plans. Always action plans. Wonderful. Okay. I think we're going to progress now into your part here, Michelle. Can we have the next slide? Oh, we have the root cause analysis. Yeah. So the other question is, in the chat box, was there anything that you discovered from your root cause analysis in addition to the survey about social isolation? So I know Vanessa mentioned something about the increasing in compassionate visits was a positive element. So from a root cause analysis, that would have been lack of compassionate visits. So it's just the converse of that. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment about any revelations that you had from your root cause analysis on social isolation. I know we had, like I say, the surprises about, people being content, as opposed to the other surprise, which was that there was a lot more isolation than had been, I guess, overtly identified.
Well, I'm not seeing anybody adding on to that. So maybe we can go to the next slide. And actually, as we go through today, and we do get into our actual PIP review. Oh, there's Luann put in some. Oh, and here comes, I may just didn't give them time, but we'll be talking a little bit more about the root cause analysis related to social isolation with Cindy at Wishick as well. Today, we are looking at steps 3 and 4 from the QAPI at a Glance resource document. Step 3 is to take your QAPI pulse with the self-assessment, which we have done. Together, we did that in a briefer format on some of our previous sessions. Next slide. And Sarah and the folks at UND have compiled these responses together from the polls that you guys were doing on this slide and the next. You can print these off to use as a benchmark to compare your progress against others in your group. Or if you would like, you can use that full print version of the self-assessment tool that Jean already just stuck in the chat box there. And we'll send this out in the follow-up email as well. I know just about all of the facilities have done this at one point or another, but it's a great time to redo that. As you can see from looking at the slide, most facilities view themselves as doing great in these areas, although there is a couple of the not sure marked. And so in looking what the not sure are related to, it occurred to me that there aren't a lot of frontline folks on these calls that we've been doing. And so that it's mostly leadership folks that have been doing that poll as we go along. So in thinking about that fourth item on the slide, they're holding staff accountable, but not punishing when they report errors or problems. This might be a good item to add to your walk rounds. So you can help explore how staff understand what their role is in pointing out opportunities for improvement. Do they feel safe in doing that? Do they know who they can talk to? Do they feel welcome to offer suggestions? This is all part of a thought process called just culture, that you are welcome to share your thoughts without fear of punishment and reprisals from that. And there's a whole line of thinking and resources that go along with that. If anyone's interested, just type in just culture into Google. Next slide. Excuse me. This slide has a lot more diversity of colors on it. So we can see that some of the facilities are not as far along on this. So looking at some of those spots, you know, we're all looking at how to develop PIPs and track data throughout these sessions. And so we're going to be talking more about that as we go along, and specifically about engaging all departments in some of our upcoming sessions. As far as the item, the QAPI training for all staff, I believe that last week Vanessa mentioned that the AHCA is working on developing new QAPI education to provide to all members. Additionally, we have in the past, and Jean has put it up in the chat again here, I've shared some information, some QAPI resources, QAPI in-service guide, that I know there's a few facilities already using this for their new hire orientation and staff training. She also added in that YouTube video, just because on that CNA in-service guide, there's a link to a video. That link doesn't work, but this link gets you to that video. We'll ask Sarah and Casey to send that out afterwards as well in the email, but it's up in the chat box right now. The third bar graph from the left mentions guiding principles, and that's actually the focus of step 4 in QAPI at a glance. So we'll go to the next slide on that. That CMS QAPI site, which if you're ever looking for QAPI resources or a place to start, if you just type in Google CMS QAPI, it brings you to, there's a lot of resources there, and there's one link to a 5-page document that breaks out all these steps and has resources to help with those as well. So if you're looking for more, there's that good stuff is in there. They have a document called Guide for Developing Purpose, Guiding Principles, and Scope for QAPI, which is linked in chat. Ideally, most of your facilities went through this process when they were developing their facility-wide QAPI plan a few years back when it became part of the rules of participation. But it is really a good idea to revisit all the elements of the QAPI plan annually. That's what the recommendations are, and with any major change. So certainly the COVID pandemic is a major change. As it's, COVID is loosening its grip on some of our facilities, not all, but some of our facilities, it might be a good time to start looking at this. Next slide. So when thinking about your guiding principles, consider your mission statement and the vision of your facility. Look around your building, look at your website. If you don't know what your mission statement is, I guarantee it's accessible. What I've got up here is the mission statement from Good Sam. Any of the entities, you type in there, if you find their website and they've got it on there, but I'm sure it's up in your buildings as well, probably on your letterhead and all those things as well. So considering this, does the work that we do here every day and by every person that works here, does this all embody what we say our purposes are? These should really be closely correlated also with your facility assessment, which I know you all have to do every year. So think about, your residents that you have, their needs, the resources that you have, and the resources that you need, the skills and services that you can provide. This should all be built into those guiding principles of not only the current work that you're doing, but how you can include continuous efforts to make it all better. So next slide. I wanted to keep that business of guiding principles kind of short. It's kind of self-explanatory. We're next going to go into talking about the PIP development. We're looking at brainstorming and goal setting today. And I really want to thank Wishick Living Center and Cindy and your team for sharing your PIP with us and being willing to help us walk through the additional steps in our social isolation improvement focus today. Next slide. So Sarah had asked that I review the PIP form that we shared in phase 1 again. And Jean shared it in the chat so that you can find it anytime. Go ahead, save that link. And what I did was I took what Cindy shared with me from their PIP and I just put it into this format. You don't have to use this format. There's actually no required format. You can use whatever works best for you, but we do have one that's already built that you can use. Also, anything that the QIO does is in the public domain. So we usually post things in Word form. So you can take them and adjust them to whatever works best for you. There's no copyrights on anything that we do. When we built this form, and the purpose of it is really using the science of improvement. And so this provides a quick way to get it all written down. It gives you the defined proof of what you did, why you did it, what the results were. This is a great way to survey your efforts that you're making on anything that you've already identified as a problem. I doubt that when survey comes, they're ever telling you something you didn't already knew was a problem. You already knew it. You've already been working on it. If you have it written down, you can already show them. We already knew, we're already starting to work on it. You may not get cited on it if you show that you're already in an effort there. Additionally, so much of the time, in long-term care, we get stuck in this loop of just addressing the loudest complainer that can make you feel like you're in a downward, never-ending and never-improving spiral. But by putting your work down on paper with actual data, real numbers, you can often see that you have made a difference for your residents and can demonstrate the successes that staff are having and actually making, that hopefully you can make that speak louder than that one complainer that keeps coming back to you because mom's shoes don't fit. So additionally, we're talking about goal setting. Goal setting is really important for any measurement related to performance improvement. It is strongly encouraged that you use that SMART goal format to make the details of what you intend to accomplish more real, rather than just an ambiguous goal of, say, decreasing the amount of loneliness in our building. We want to strive to make our goal a bit more specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And Jean is posting another worksheet from CMS that is a goal-setting worksheet that helps you, pick out how to make it specific, measurable, etc. So you get those goals down on paper, and that helps you know when you've achieved success. Excuse me, my mouth is so dry today. So let's go to the next slide. And Cindy, I wonder if you would help us with this. I've just taken their fishbone and posted it up here. And I'm wondering if you could just walk through a few of the what you've got there of how I assume you met as a group and discussed this and some of the things you came up with in your team meeting.
We did. We met a couple weeks ago and talked about, we didn't know if we would find that many of our residents were lonely or not, but we talked about after we had the social worker go out and interview our residents, we were surprised. We only did 12 of them, and surprised with the numbers that came back to us, thinking that, if we interviewed the rest of them, maybe 25% of our residents are lonely. Understandable. But we don't want them to be lonely. So what can we do to change it? So we looked at what is causing this. Well, of course, we have scheduled visiting hours, so they can have visitors, but we don't allow the visitors to go to the rooms. Only compassionate care visits, and we call it comfort care instead of end of life, are allowed to go directly to the room for a visit. Otherwise, the rest of our residents have visitation either outside, if it's nice, outside in our visitation hut, or we have visitation rooms in our facility that are monitored. However, right now we have an outbreak going on, so we can't even have that going on. You know, all of our employees wearing masks every day. They can't see our faces anymore. They don't identify with some of us when they don't see us very often. They don't see us smile. They just see eyes is all they see. You know, our doors are locked. Of course they're isolated, and of course they can be lonely. We have a lot of activity going on when we can have activity going on, but it's still not the same. We talked about lack of touch. Our families are upset, and that trickles down to the residents when they talk on the phone. Sometimes we have to separate roommates. They've had that roommate forever, and now they don't even have that person in their life anymore. Their diagnoses, of course, sometimes they just don't understand at all what's going on, and why do you people have these weird masks and shields and goggles on? Of course, winter, they were confined to the building the entire winter. If they didn't have like a doctor's visit, they never left our building for anything. Less family visits. We find that families do visit less when we have outbreaks in our facility or in our community. Our house here doesn't look homey anymore. We have signage hanging everywhere in our building. It looks institutional instead of homey. And many times they're totally confined to their rooms. Having meals in their rooms, there's no reason for them to come out anymore. And I can totally understand why they would say they are lonely. So we, as a team, have a plan as to how we can lessen some of that.
Great. All right. Thank you for addressing that. And we'll come back to you. Thank you. I'm going to go back one slide if we could. Thanks. Okay, so you can see down at the bottom here, we went through the barriers, and that's our fishbone diagram there. And then just pulled out some of those that are that we look at as what our root causes are for what the current issue is. So we have confined to the building all winter, less or no visitation. All right, and then we'll skip ahead 2 slides to go, there we go, to the next part of our PIP here, which is exploring potential interventions that will address our root causes. And so Cindy, once again, if you could just share some of your brainstorming ideas that you guys came up with, that'd be great.
So some of the ideas that we've been talking about is educating our staff, especially our one-to-one staff, activities, the CNAs, the nurses that have most of contact with our residents. Changing our verbiage when we talk to the residents, letting them know daily, you know, when we greet them in the morning when they wake up, letting them know that they do count, that we're so glad that you live here. I'm so glad that you're a part of my life. Just enforcing to them that they're here and they make a difference in our lives. Letting them know that we care about them. We need to change the way we talk to our residents. So we're going to be working on that in the future. We also have formed a committee off of this where we know that summer is coming, and that maybe most of our residents will want to be outside. Families will want to be outside visiting. It's safer for them to visit out. So we've already been looking at purchasing new outdoor furniture and strategically placing pods outside with gardens, with flowers, making it very inviting and inviting the family, but also enticing our residents to be outside more often than they are. And of course, sunshine and fresh air is always the best medicine for anyone. So hopefully we can reverse this by doing that.
Wonderful, thank you. I just realized I should have typed, Cindy had sent me a lot of their brainstorming ideas and I didn't get it typed into our format, but you can see where it would go on this PIP document if you were using this one. I welcome anybody else that would like to share any other ideas. unmute and share some thoughts or type them into chat, because we're all working on the same objective of social isolation. I was also thinking, as you were going through your fishbone, Cindy, and you mentioned the masks, Dr. Jervich has mentioned now I'm in lots of different sessions, so I don't know if he said it to one session many times or just every session, and but he talks about the expression you can share by just raising your eyebrows. And, they can't see your smile with your lips, but they can see that look with your eyebrows raised. And that's just one intervention. But, reminding staff as you're talking about what they can say and how they can make them feel loved, encouraging our staff to raise your eyebrows as you're going in. And I welcome anybody other thoughts if anybody has any. All right, and so next what we do is we use that PDSA area here to track who is doing what and when, and then, how did it go? Do we need to make changes and try again? And we're going to delve deeper into these action steps in next week's lesson. The last part on this specific PIP document is our benchmarking area, our metrics area, where I've just typed in here that what Wishick used was the UCLA Loneliness Scale, and they had found 3 out of the 12 that they surveyed met their metrics and the date that they did that. And they can type out here, what their next dates are going to be to keep continuous tracking there, but we can go into more of that in some other sessions. And